Hello friends, how are you doing today? It's great to see you back here again. If you do not know who I am, hi, nice to meet you. My name is Paige Layle. I am autistic, and so over here we talk about autism and stuff. You may know me from TikTok. If you're not doing so already, feel free to go check out my TikTok at Paige Layle. And while you're at it, you could also follow my Instagram with the same name. And if you are a returning subscriber, just know that I love you more than life itself. Thank you for being here and thank you for caring. I'm having a really weird trichotillomania day, which is hilarious because of today's video topic. So as you likely know, I am diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, but as you may not know, I'm also diagnosed with 85 other things. That's a hyperbole. It is likely that I have a lot more disorders than I am diagnosed with, and than I even really care to self-diagnose myself with, because so many of my disorders are so intertwined and overlap and also exist inside of each other. Like, there is a very good chance that I would have possibly none of these disorders if I wasn't autistic. Out of all of my disorders, OCD is my least favorite. There's nothing cool that having OCD gives you. Absolutely nothing cool. I have not talked about OCD, I don't think, very much ever. I can recall one TikTok video that I've made during the entirety of this kind of internet journey that I'm on. And that video was just to kind of be like, OCD is not just cleaning and keeping things organized. It is very hard, and so don't be like that. Besides that, I've not talked about OCD, and that is for a very specific reason. That is because I went to therapy for years and years and years to try to combat my OCD. Today we'll be going over the DSM-5 and how psychiatrists will diagnose OCD, so the diagnostic criteria. So I'll be able to go more in depth with my experience and my feelings after and during the reading of the criteria. But basically, I have this analogy. It may be completely improper, but OCD feels like an addiction. My body and my mind don't want me to not do my compulsions. And I've been working for years and years to not do them. But the thing is, every time that I do an activity where I used to have a compulsion there, I am still getting a thought in my head, a reminder that is now just saying, don't do that thing, instead of do that thing. The only problem is I don't get the satisfactory, good feeling of doing that thing in the way, the ritual, the obsessive whatever that I used to, but it's never gone. And so even though there are very few compulsions and rituals that I allow myself to do, they are always there. They are always screaming at me to do them. With that being said, again, talking about OCD and reading about OCD and hearing all of the things that I've been trying to suppress for so long makes me a little nervous. I feel as though if I were to continue again with the compulsions, I would start all the way back from the beginning. And I don't want to start again. So still to this day, I'm not completely devoid of OCD and compulsions and rituals and intrusive thoughts for sure. As I'm learning and growing up, I'm actually seeing a lot more things that I have rituals for or ideas about that I hadn't even thought of, or that just because they didn't cause me harm. And so I do allow myself to do those. I also do allow myself to pick my split ends. I do that a lot. So I have the DSM-5 here on hand, and I'm going to be reading it and explaining the diagnostic criteria for receiving an OCD diagnosis. With these criteria, within these I will be providing real life examples probably from my own life, or ways that you can kind of get a better picture, a better idea, rather than the medical language and dialects that are used in the manual. Once we go over that stuff, I'm going to go over common subtypes of OCD. Now, these subtypes are not diagnoses, and they're not rigid, they're not in boxes. It's just kind of like an OCD community has kind of seen that there are these various patterns. And then nearing the end of the video, I will be talking more about my life, how OCD and autism relate, how OCD and my other disorders relate, and how I live with OCD. I do want to thank you for being here. I think that there are a lot of misconceptions regarding OCD, and I would have to say it definitely bothers me when people use OCD so lightly. And one thing about being diagnosed with any disorder is that it needs to have a severe negative impact on your life. Okay, so to begin, OCD is defined as presence of obsessions, compulsions, or both. Well, that's pretty easy. That's in the name. Cool. So obsessions are defined by these two things. The first is recurrent and persistent thoughts, urges, or impulses that are experienced at some time during the disturbance to be intrusive and unwanted, and that in most individuals cause marked anxiety or distress. And the second thing, obsessions are defined by the individual attempts to ignore or suppress such thoughts, urges, or images, or to neutralize them with some other thought or action, i.e. by performing a compulsion. So that is what obsession means. Now, compulsions are defined by these two things. The first one being repetitive behaviors or mental acts that the individual feels driven to perform in response to an obsession or according to rules that must be applied rigidly. I am smiling and laughing because that is part of the autism diagnostic criteria. The second thing that compulsions are defined by: the behaviors or mental acts are aimed at preventing or reducing anxiety or distress, or preventing some dreaded event or situation. However, these behaviors or mental acts are not connected in a realistic way with what they are designed to neutralize or prevent, or are clearly excessive. So the presence of obsessions, compulsions, or both is one out of the 4 things that need to be prevalent to diagnose OCD. And we went over what obsessions and compulsions are. So now going on to the second thing that you need to be diagnosed with OCD. The obsessions or compulsions are time-consuming or cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. This is the weird thing about disorders. 2 people can have exactly the same compulsions and obsessions, but 2 completely scenarios in which they live. And so one person may not find them a detriment at all. And that person would not be diagnosed with OCD because one of the criteria is that it is not fun, not good for you. I think that's strange because I also still have OCD even if I'm doing okay. Even if I go to therapy for years and years for OCD and then stop doing my compulsions as much, I still have OCD. I'm just not absolutely dying anymore. This little section of the disorder is really affecting the person's life is pretty prevalent in every disorder that I've ever read about. But anyway, that's what the DSM-5 says. We'll see what the DSM-6 says later when it comes out. So now the third thing that makes up OCD. The obsessive compulsive symptoms are not attributable to any kind of physiological effects of a substance. Example, a drug of abuse, a medication, or another medical condition. Anytime before I am speaking to a psychiatrist, they always want to make sure that I have been free of marijuana and alcohol for a certain amount of time, or that I'm also currently not under the influence. They want to make sure that all of these symptoms are prevalent without any other things that are causing immediate effect on your body. So sometimes you'll only get diagnosed with the thing that works best for you. I have every single one of these things that make up an OCD diagnosis, but that's not all. I have a lot more stuff impacting me. If this was it, I'd likely only get diagnosed with OCD, I guess, obviously. But I didn't even know that I had an OCD diagnosis for the longest time. And this is the fourth thing, and this is where we really get into the other disorders. The disturbance is not better explained by any other mental disorder. Example, excessive worries as generalized anxiety disorder, preoccupation with appearance as in body dysmorphic disorder, difficulty discarding or parting with possessions as in hoarding disorder, hair pulling as in trichotillomania, skin picking as in excoriation disorder, stereotypies as in stereotypic movement disorder, preoccupation with substances or gambling as in substance-related and addictive disorders, ritualized eating behavior as in eating disorders, preoccupation with having an illness as in illness anxiety disorder, sexual urges or fantasies as in paraphilic disorders, impulses as in disruptive impulse control and conduct disorders, guilty ruminations as in major depressive disorder, thought insertion or delusional preoccupations as in schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorders, or repetitive patterns of behavior as in autism spectrum disorder. Party! I have a good amount of those things. Now there is a little bit of a sub thing for OCD that it says in the diagnostic criteria, and that is just to specify if the person with OCD has good or fair insight, poor insight, or absent insight. This is basically how in touch with reality are you and how much do you know that your compulsions and your intrusive thoughts are fake. So good or fair insight means that the individual recognizes that the obsessive compulsivity is not true, like definitely not true, or probably not true, or may not be true. You know that your actions are not necessarily warranted. With poor insight, and this is where I was, the individual thinks the obsessive compulsivity is likely true. And then there's absent insight or delusional beliefs. The individual is completely convinced that their obsessive compulsivity beliefs are absolutely true. Then there's also another specification, and that is tic-related OCD, which if the individual has a current or past history of a tic disorder. Boom, boom, boom. That is the diagnostic criteria of OCD. Now, for some more examples and to better understand this, I'm going to go into different types of OCD. So again, I'd like to remind you guys that these are not diagnoses. These are not rigid. They're just kind of a general outline for some people with OCD who feel like they fit into a more specified category of OCD, of which other people also feel they specify in, and everyone can help each other. One thing that I do want you to know is that there are infinite types of OCD. It can impact any thought, any action, any belief, anything big in your life you can develop obsessions or compulsions with. And also, it's usually the most important things in your life that you will develop obsessions and compulsions with. My most recent one was I was having a huge gender crisis for like 2 months and I could not sleep. And I did not know that I was giving into my OCD with all of that. Did not know that was an OCD thing until 2 months later. And then I said, stop it. I seriously have just accepted that my brain is a completely separate entity from me, and my brain is actively trying to kill me. My brain tries to make me end my own life. In which I say, brain, if you want to kill me, then why don't you just stop yourself? You know, why are you making me do all the dirty work? Nuh-uh. One subcategory of OCD is related to hoarding. However, some aspects of hoarding are no longer considered to be part of OCD and are starting to be considered as a whole disorder in and of itself. I am a hoarder. I've been a hoarder since childhood. I've always struggled with hoarding, but my parents kind of helped me out with that as I aged. I primarily would hoard wrappers of different things. Candy wrappers, a wrapper of a chocolate, Rice Krispie wrappers, anything that had food in it once. Kool-Aid Jammer packages, I would hoard them. So hoarding is also known as the inability to discard useless or worn out possessions. However, it becomes somewhat complicated because people with OCD will hoard for very specific obsessive worries or fears and will still be diagnosed with having OCD rather than hoarding disorder. My thing with hoarding anything and everything, I also would hoard, I try to hoard as much garbage as I could, not when it came to like food, that was like rotting, like food is food, whatever. Cardboard boxes, stuffed animals, clothes. There were very few things that I could get rid of, ever. It took forever. My room has always been a mess. Still to this day, it's messy, but I do better at throwing things away. But I had a hard time throwing things away for 2 reasons. One, because I felt like climate change was my fault and my problem, and by throwing things in the garbage, I was ruining the earth. And so I tried to not do that, and I tried to use every bit of garbage or anything that I used ever into a new thing, so I was not killing everybody on the planet. This started like as young as I can remember. But the second one, and I think the biggest one, is that I felt that everything was a person. I don't know, I personified and still to this day continue to personify everything that I have. Everything has feelings and I don't want to hurt their feelings, so I will keep them forever and take care of them. I had a very hard time giving up clothes, and as a child you grow up and you no longer fit in some clothes. I would still keep them. They were my clothes. I was going to keep them. I would try to convince my parents I'm keeping them so I can have my child wear them someday. I'm keeping these teddy bears for my children. I'm keeping these worn out socks for my children. My parents would then try to give my clothing to my younger cousins. That still made me very upset, but I tried to tell myself that it was okay and my cousins were going to take care of them. The clothing wouldn't be so upset with me, and then they would be happy and everything would be fine, and it's better than them going into a landfill. Wasn't better than me having them and them not being worn, but it was better than them being thrown into the trash where I would be upsetting the clothing and also killing the planet. Then it came to donating clothing to thrift stores, which I think it started being when I started shopping at thrift stores myself, that I went, this is cool, this is good, this is a good thing, this is okay, we like this, clothing gets worn. Other subtypes of OCD, checking things, not trusting yourself, checking to make sure that you are not going to kill people or yourself or your house or anything like that. This is just to prevent harm, to prevent damage, are constantly checking things like the doorknobs, the taps, the oven, your car. You're looking at pictures to make sure that you're remembering things correctly. You are taking a pregnancy test every single day because you might be pregnant, I do not know. Rereading text over and over again. This could take up a lot of your day and it sucks and is stressful and you always think that your house is on fire. One thing that I started doing when I was like, I don't know if I unplugged the hair straightener, and I would go to school and be like, I don't know if my hair straightener is unplugged. I just started taking my hair straightener to school with me. I don't know if I unplugged the hair straightener. And I opened my bag and I'm like, oh, I did, it's right here. Everything's cool. Getting cameras all around my house, so when I'm not at home, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I did this. I can just look and be like, I did. And it can also cause actual damage to objects from constantly being manipulated, pulled, tightened in ways that they don't need to be and shouldn't be. The next one is contamination OCD, which is pretty common. I think that y'all think of when you hear of OCD. But contamination OCD is more than I don't like germs. It is the idea that a specific germ or something being dirty is going to cause harm to you or a loved one and must be cleaned in order for the thing, whatever you're doing, to continue. For example, washing a plate 57 times because your loved one has a peanut allergy and you think you may have eaten a peanut butter sandwich on this plate. And so you washed it 57 times because 57 is a great number, for one. And also because if you do that, then they will not die of anaphylactic shock. Another example is the outside air is contaminated. It is disgusting. It is filled with acid rain, so many chemicals and pollution being pumped into the air that all of my friends and family are going to die of lung cancer. Everyone should be wearing masks at all times. And also everyone should be stripping their clothes outside. And as soon as they get inside, they have to be naked and shower immediately because the outside is contaminated. Other things that are contaminated: human beings shaking hands, having sex, your clothes, having dead skin constantly on you, split ends continuously on your hair, money, telephones, door handles, everything you can think of. Sucky, gross, horrible, awful. Now, intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts suck so bad. Intrusive thoughts are just thoughts that continuously, repetitively pop into your head, and they are disturbing, they are horrific, and they are things that you do not want. You do not want to think about. You do not want to go through with whatever action or whatever idea this thought is in your head. It comes up, you hate it, you wish you didn't have to think it or see it, but it comes up and now it's there. And you think that you are an awful, horrible human being. And a few that I specifically want to talk about. One is magical thinking, intrusive thoughts. And this is my bread and butter, basically. It is associating things with magic. It's the kind of idea that performing this ritual is going to magically make something happen or not happen. And by acting in a certain way, you are going to be preventing this to happen. You're making a magical connection between things that you can control. Control is a big theme here. Examples of this magical thinking, intrusive thoughts are certain colors are good or bad. Step on a crack, it'll break your mother's back. I could make people die with my mind. Any thought that I had means that it can come true. I thought of that thing, now that thing is going to happen. I am probably God and magic, and everything I think of is going to happen unless I perform whatever ritual that probably makes no sense, and then it will not happen anymore. There are a few numbers that I really do enjoy, and so everything has to be that number. It needs to be repeated for things to be okay. Other intrusive thoughts, having violent ones that involve hurting yourself or others with any tool in any environment, that can really convince you that you want to do those things. And one that I really want to talk about, that this one really, it really hurts and is really sucky to say. I've only told 3 people this in my entire life, and now I'm going to tell the rest of you because it shouldn't be as taboo and sad as it is, because it's quite isolating. I completely understand though, because how people view this is quite negative, as do I. So I understand the horrid reaction. I would just like to remind you before I add this, these are intrusive, unwanted, horrible, disgusting thoughts that I do not wish to have. They are not a representation of me. I'm just gonna try to make this short. I don't want this to be a whole thing. There's a subtype of OCD called POCD, and the P stands for a word that no one wants to say out loud. I don't know if I can say it without YouTube demonetizing this video. It has to do with children. I think that's all that I'm going to say. I'm shutting down. I don't want to talk about it anymore, but quite difficult. I think that I'm going to make a whole video around that because intrusive thoughts are so fucking hard. To have your brain, your thoughts not be yours. You can't control them, and your brain is constantly flashing you with images of me. I see in images. My brain, I have an eidetic photographic memory, so anything my brain wants to tell me, I don't hear it, I see it. Seeing things really is shit. Is a bag of dicks. Sucks so much. There are also things like symmetry in OCD. This one affected me huge. I felt like my body has to be even. Everything has to be equal on both sides. If I spun around one way, I would have to spin around the other way. If I stepped on a leaf on my left foot that was like really crunchy, I have to step on a leaf on my right foot that's just as crunchy. Oh, but I stepped on a leaf and it wasn't as crunchy. Well, now I have to step on another leaf that like equals out the crunch level with the right foot again. Oh, but now that one's more crunchy. Now I gotta step on another crunchy-ish leaf with my left foot. Now that one's more crunchy, and you gotta make the crunchiness even. There were times where I would stub a toe on my one foot and would force myself to stub a toe on my other foot. Or if I was punched in one arm, I would punch myself in the other arm. Hangnails were a huge one. Hangnail on one finger, I'm gonna create one on the other one and the other hand. Yay, great, 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 awesome. So there are a lot more, there's infinite subtypes of OCD. Any single thought can be an OCD thing. Anything can turn into an obsession or a compulsion. Anything, every single thing, especially the things that mean the most to you. So one thing I wanted to talk about now, just to finish this video, is autism and OCD. Some people ask me, how do you tell the difference between what is autism and what is OCD? And what is ADHD and what is anxiety and what is depression? And my answer is, I don't. And I don't care to. I give myself permission to not do that, because doing that is something I have tried to do before. And you guessed it, OCD, baby. Something that I cannot categorize because I don't exist with only one or the other. I exist with all of these conditions all combined in one brain. And so there's no way to tell what is OCD and what is autism, especially when some of the criteria are the exact same. I try to only describe things that I know are autism when I speak online, but there are a lot of other things going on in my life and in my brain that I just don't commonly include when I talk about autism, because I'm not sure if it is autism and I would hate to be misleading in any way. It's tough to know what is OCD and what is autism when it comes to repetitive movements and behaviors, because I feel like the reasons why I'm doing the thing reaches the same goal, whether it's autism or it's OCD. You do a thing because it feels good. You have to do it this way because this is the right way to do it, and this is what's the good way, and it feels good. It's a means of control. It's a means of regulation, like things autistically, like stimming, echolalia, having rules and patterns. I have so many rules that don't exist except for my brain, and I know that they are autism things, but they're also OCD things. Those are also OCD things. I have colors I will not wear. OCD or autism? I don't know. I have rules and feelings about different numbers, different colors, different days. My whole life, I need rules. I need rules in order to function, and life doesn't have all of the rules that I would like it to have. So I've created a bunch of my own, apparently. My brain has automatically, my brain's like, this is how we do things, blah, blah, blah. And I know that's an autism thing, but it's also an OCD thing. So I do not know. I do not have the answers to that. I just know that it sucks. It sucks when it's harmful. I think that might be the difference there, actually. OCD is harmful for me. My autism repetitive things aren't really harmful, except in the way socially, I guess. But stimming, the way that I stim often is not harmful. There have been harmful stims that I've had to try to figure out, but stimming feels good to me, controls my body, is something that I do in response to a situation where I have a feeling. Echolalia does not harm me. Might harm your eardrums, but I don't care. Only wearing a certain color does not harm me. Not wanting my food to be touching doesn't harm me that much. Having things needing to be a certain way than the way I touch them and no one else is allowed to touch them harms me a little bit, I guess, but again, this is just socially. The things with my my repetitive behaviors in relation to autism is, if I was the only human being on this earth, there would be nothing wrong with them. I wouldn't feel like this is causing a detriment to my life, I guess. But then when it comes to intrusive thoughts and obsessions and compulsions, living with OCD, just OCD, even if I was the only human being on this planet and no one else lived here, I still would feel like, this sucks. Why am I listening to this weird authoritative pictures? I want to say voice, but I don't hear voices. Even when I'm reading a book, I don't hear the words. I see a word and I relate it to a photo in my mind. Even if there was no one else on the earth, if I did every single OCD compulsion, I would harm myself very much. Oh, definitely if I did doing all the compulsions is one thing, but following through on intrusive thoughts, which I don't think I've ever done, because intrusive thoughts are things that aren't me. I should really trust myself more. Like, there are times where I'm like, I can't drive a car, like I was saying. I've never even hit a curb. I've never gotten a speeding ticket. I've never even looked at a person and wanted to physically harm them. I've never caused physical harm to a human being, at least not on purpose. I might have accidentally kicked someone in dance one time or something and then cried about it for 5 days. Oh my God, one time I did elbow a little girl in the head by accident. and I cried more than she did. So I guess that's the main difference that I can say there. Yeah, but long story short, OCD is a butthole. And this is the first video that I will be making about OCD, and this is just what is OCD. And as we continue, I think I'm going to include more OCD specific videos. Because again, some of them may be autism specific, and I don't know about it. So I'm going to be open with that and try to be as transparent as possible in every video that I make surrounding OCD in the future. That this could be autism, but it could also be OCD. Specifically, if it hurts me, I'm going to say it's probably OCD, unless it's a stim. But if a stim and it's hurting me and I can't stop, because I'm supposed to, it could be OCD. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you learned something. As always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for caring, and thank you for learning more. Once again, I am Paige Layle. I'm here for you every Friday, so you can go subscribe down below if you like this video and if you want to hear more and learn more about me and my life with autism. But I'm going to say ta-ta for now. I will see you later. You guys have a great weekend, and I will see you next Friday. Mwah. Bye.